Why avoidants obsess over you after no. You ever notice how some people pull away, but the moment you stop chasing them, they can't stop thinking about you? Let's talk about why avoidants, those people who seem emotionally unavailable, distant, even dismissive, suddenly become obsessed after you say no to them. It's not magic, it's not coincidence, it's human psychology at its core. You see, avoidants crave independence. They're wired to run from closeness because deep down, intimacy feels threatening. They grew up believing that closeness leads to pain, so they push it away, sometimes without even realizing it. But the moment you withdraw, the game changes. Why? Because now, instead of feeling smothered, they feel uncertainty, and uncertainty is the birthplace of desire. Think about it. We value what we might lose. When something is freely available, we take it for granted, but when it's slipping away, that's when our brain kicks into overdrive. Suddenly, you're the unfinished story in their mind. This is why marketing uses scarcity, why limited time offers make people rush to buy. When something seems rare, our brain assumes it's valuable. And guess what? People work the same way. So when you say no, when you walk away, when you reclaim your power, an avoidant doesn't just notice. They feel it, and that feeling wakes up their obsession. But here's the key. Your power isn't in making them chase you. It's in knowing your worth, whether they do or not. Stop playing the game. Stop making someone else's fears your problem. When you own your value, the right people won't just notice, they'll stay. Avoidants operate on a deeply ingrained psychological pattern that makes them crave independence while simultaneously fearing intimacy. This paradox is at the core of why they pull away when someone gets too close, yet become obsessed when that person withdraws. Their behavior is not random. It's rooted in subconscious fears developed over time, often as a defense mechanism formed in childhood. When someone with an avoidant attachment style senses closeness, their instinct is to create distance. They might do this by minimizing emotional conversations, keeping interactions surface level, or even physically pulling away. They have learned, whether from past relationships, early childhood experiences, or personal belief systems, that intimacy comes with a cost. That cost could be vulnerability, potential rejection, or a feeling of being trapped. Their entire nervous system is wired to perceive closeness as a threat, so their automatic response is to retreat. However, the moment they sense withdrawal from the other person, something shifts inside them. Suddenly the threat isn't closeness, it's loss. The same person they dismissed, avoided, or devalued is now creating space, and that space creates a vacuum. It's in that vacuum that their obsession starts to grow. Human psychology is fascinating because the mind places disproportionate value on things that seem uncertain. The moment certainty is removed, desire increases. Avoidants don't realize it consciously, but their brain is reacting to a shift in perceived control. When they were the ones keeping distance, they felt safe, but when the other person steps back, the script flips. Now the avoidant is on the receiving end of uncertainty. Their mind begins searching for answers. Why did they pull away? Did I make a mistake? Are they with someone else? Did I misjudge their value? These questions create an open loop in their mind, and the brain hates open loops. It craves resolution. The very thing they feared, emotional entanglement, now becomes an obsession, not because they suddenly crave deep intimacy, but because their sense of control has been disrupted. This is the same psychological mechanism that makes people desire things they once took for granted. Think about a time when you were in a store, saw something available in abundance, and walked right past it. But the moment you found out it was a limited edition or almost sold out, suddenly your interest spiked. Your brain registered it as scarce and therefore more valuable. Avoidants apply the same principle to relationships without even realizing it. When you were readily available, they felt no urgency. But when your energy shifts, when your focus moves elsewhere, when you stop trying to pull them closer, that's when they start obsessing. However, this obsession isn't necessarily about love or a sudden emotional breakthrough. It's about their relationship with uncertainty. They are not reacting to the loss of a deep emotional connection. They are reacting to the loss of control over the dynamic. The moment you say no, they are faced with a version of you that is no longer waiting, no longer chasing, no longer validating their avoidant tendencies. And that is what keeps them thinking about you, often more intensely than when you were actively in their life. This is why so many people are confused when an avoidant ex resurfaces after months of silence, suddenly expressing interest or regret. It's not always about love. It's about the fact that time and distance have removed their sense of certainty. When you were present, they could predict your behavior. Now they can't. That unpredictability is what ignites their obsession. Scarcity is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. When something is abundant, people take it for granted. When something becomes scarce, its perceived value skyrockets. This principle applies to everything from products to opportunities, and most importantly, to relationship. The moment a person withdraws their attention, time, or presence, the other person begins to perceive them as more valuable, not necessarily because they have changed, but because the sense of availability has shifted. The human brain is wired to prioritize things that are not easily accessible. This is why marketing strategies rely so heavily on scarcity tactics. When you see a limited time offer or a one-day sale, your impulse to act increases. It's not necessarily because you need the item, but because the idea of missing out triggers urgency. Your brain perceives the product as more valuable simply because the opportunity to obtain it is shrinking. Relationships work the same way. When someone is readily available, always answering texts immediately, always saying yes, always making time, it's easy for the other person to assume they will always be there. Their presence is predictable, and the brain doesn't assign as much value to what it considers predictable. But when that availability is taken away, something changes. The person who once felt like a constant is now absent. And that absence creates a gap in perception. That gap is what makes the brain start assigning higher value. For avoidants, this is especially true. When they feel that someone is emotionally available and seeking closeness, their instinct is to pull away. They assume that since the other person is always present, there's no urgency to reciprocate. However, when that presence is removed, when the other person suddenly stops chasing, stops calling, stops trying to maintain a connection, the avoidance starts to feel something different. It's no longer about pushing away an available person. It's about dealing with the discomfort of uncertainty. Uncertainty fuels desire. When something is no longer a guarantee, the mind starts to fixate on it. This is why people reminisce about past relationships only after they're over, why they miss things they once overlooked, and why they start craving something they previously ignored. The shift from certainty to uncertainty creates an imbalance, and the brain is designed to seek balance. The moment a person steps back, the avoidant begins to experience a psychological shift. They start to wonder, why aren't they reaching out? Are they seeing someone else? Did I misjudge their value? These questions lead to obsession, not necessarily because they are in love, but because they are experiencing a lack of control over the situation. The very thing they once dismissed has now become scarce, and their brain registers that scarcity as something valuable. This is why people who were once neglected in relationships suddenly become desirable the moment they move on. The avoidant may not have wanted them when they were available, but now that they are unavailable, the avoidant starts feeling a pull. This pull is not always a sign of true emotional connection. Rather, it's a sign of the avoidant's internal struggle with control and uncertainty. And the lesson here is simple. Availability reduces perceived value and scarcity increases it. When someone stops chasing, they become the thing that an avoidant now has to work to understand. And that effort, the act of trying to figure out what changed, is what fuels the obsession. It's not about love. It's about the human brain's deep-rooted need to close the gap between what was once certain and what has now become unknown. When you tell an avoidant no or withdraw your attention, it triggers an obsession in them, not necessarily because they love you, but because they suddenly feel a loss of control. Avoidants are wired to push away closeness because intimacy feels threatening. They thrive in situations where they can control the level of emotional depth in a relationship. As long as they are the ones setting the pace, maintaining distance, and deciding when to engage, they feel safe. But when you change the dynamic by stepping back, rejecting their advances, or refusing to engage in the same patterns, their sense of control is shattered. The power they once had, the ability to dictate the closeness or distance in the relationship, has been taken from them. This disruption forces them to focus on you, not because they suddenly understand their feelings, but because they are now fixated on the uncertainty that your absence creates. Avoidants are not emotionless. They do feel connection, but their instinct is to suppress those feelings because emotional closeness makes them uncomfortable. When they are in control, they can push those feelings aside and justify their emotional detachment. But when they are no longer in control, when you are the one who steps away, the emotions they have buried start to surface. This is not necessarily a sign of love. It is a sign of internal conflict. The brain starts obsessing over what was once predictable but is now uncertain. Loss of control is deeply unsettling for anyone, but for an avoidant, it is especially triggering. Since they have spent their lives creating emotional barriers, they rely on a sense of predictability to feel safe. When you say no, you break that predictability. They were comfortable knowing you were there, knowing they could retreat and you would still be available. When that changes, they are forced to confront something they never expected, the realization that they no longer have control over how you feel about them. This is why avoidants often come back after a period of absence. They were not afraid of losing you when they were the ones creating distance. But the moment they realize that you are no longer chasing them, they start to panic. Their brain begins to question everything. Did I misjudge them? Are they really moving on? What if I made a mistake? These thoughts create an open loop in their mind, a lingering question that needs an answer. The mind hates unfinished business, so the avoidant becomes fixated on resolving the uncertainty. However, this obsession is not necessarily about love. It is about control. The avoidant is not suddenly ready to be emotionally available. They are reacting to the discomfort of not being in charge of the dynamic. Their return is often not a genuine commitment to change, but rather an attempt to regain a sense of stability. If they can get you to re-engage, to show interest again, to step back into the role you once played, they will feel reassured. But as soon as they regain that control, their original avoidance tendencies will likely return. This is why the cycle repeats itself. The avoidant pushes away, then obsesses when you step back. They return just enough to test whether they still have an influence over you, and if they succeed, the pattern starts all over again. The only way to break this cycle is to recognize that their obsession is not proof of love, it is proof of their struggle with uncertainty and control. When you stop responding to their attempts to regain power over the situation, you force them to confront their own emotional patterns instead of dragging you into their unresolved fears. When someone pulls away, especially an avoidant, and you decide to stop chasing, you become an unfinished story in their mind. The human brain craves completion. It is wired to close loops, to resolve uncertainty, and to make sense of things. When a relationship or interaction ends abruptly, especially in a way they didn't anticipate, the brain struggles to let go. Instead of moving on, it fixates. Avoidants rely on a sense of control to feel safe. As long as they know where you stand, whether you're waiting for them, pursuing them, or hoping they change, they can keep you at a comfortable emotional distance. They assume they can predict your behavior, but when you step back, remove your attention, and stop feeding into the dynamic, you break that predictability. Suddenly they are left with questions instead of certainty. This is where the obsession begins. The brain naturally revisits unresolved situations because it wants to make sense of them. When an avoidant assumes they have control over a dynamic, and that assumption is proven wrong, their brain flags it as an incomplete puzzle. They start replaying conversations, analyzing moments, and wondering why things changed. Not because they suddenly understand their emotions, but because the situation is no longer fitting their internal narrative. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect, the tendency to remember and dwell on unfinished tasks more than completed ones. It's why people who don't get closure in a relationship struggle to move on. The avoidant may have been comfortable keeping you at arm's length, but when you disrupt that pattern by stepping back, their brain begins working overtime to resolve the inconsistency. They might not have wanted closeness before, but now they feel the discomfort of something unresolved, and that discomfort fuels their fixation. Even if they were the ones who created distance, your withdrawal is a shift they weren't expecting. When you were available, they could minimize your value because they felt in control of the situation. But once you stop engaging, their brain reinterprets your worth. You are no longer a predictable presence. You are now a question mark. And question marks are powerful. Think about cliffhangers in movies or TV shows. If a show ends on a dramatic, unresolved note, you can't stop thinking about it. Your brain keeps trying to fill in the blanks even if you weren't particularly invested before. This is what happens in the mind of an avoidant when you walk away. They start searching for answers, wondering what changed and replaying the past to make sense of the present. But here's the key. Their obsession is not necessarily about love or deep emotional revelation. It's about their brain struggling with the discomfort of an open loop. If they reach out, it's often not because they are ready for intimacy, but because they are trying to ease the cognitive dissonance in their mind. They want reassurance, they want to know they still have some level of influence, and they want to close the gap between what they expected and what actually happened. This is why people who once seemed indifferent suddenly start showing interest. When you move on, it's not that they didn't have feelings before, but their brain didn't assign urgency to those feelings until the story became unfinished. By stepping back, you force them into a state of uncertainty, and uncertainty is what drives them to fixate. But the real power isn't in making them obsess over you. It's in recognizing that their fixation doesn't mean they are ready to change. Many avoidants will return just to regain a sense of control, not because they are prepared to break their patterns. Understanding this allows you to see through the illusion and stay grounded in your own self-worth. Walking away is one of the most powerful things you can do in any relationship, especially when dealing with an avoidant. Many people mistakenly believe that chasing, convincing, or proving their worth will make an avoidant change their mind and choose closeness. But the truth is, the more you push, the more they pull away. The reason for this is simple. Avoidants associate closeness with a loss of independence, a feeling of being overwhelmed or trapped. They see pursuit as pressure, and pressure activates their instinct to retreat. However, when you walk away, everything changes. Suddenly, you are no longer the one seeking validation or engagement. You are no longer trying to pull them closer. Instead, you remove yourself from the dynamic, and in doing so, you shift the entire power balance. Avoidants are not used to this. They expect people to chase them because they know their emotional unavailability creates a sense of longing in others. But when you refuse to play the game, they experience something unfamiliar: loss. Loss is a powerful motivator. When something or someone is always available, the brain does not assign urgency or deep value to it. But when that thing disappears, the brain suddenly recognizes its importance. This is why people don't realize how much they appreciate something until it's gone. The moment you step away, the avoidant is confronted with the reality that they no longer have access to you. And that reality forces them to reevaluate everything. Walking away creates space. It removes the noise, the push and pull, the cycle of frustration. It gives the avoidant time to sit with their emotions, something they often try to avoid. When you were always present, they had the luxury of keeping their feelings at bay, but now without your presence to distract them, they are left alone with their thoughts. This is when the internal conflict begins. At first, they may feel relieved. Avoidants often crave solitude, so in the beginning, your absence might feel like a break from the pressure they associated with the connection. But over time, something unexpected happens. They start to notice the void. The messages that used to be there, gone. The comfort of knowing someone cared, even when they resisted, disappeared. And then their mind starts to wonder, why aren't they reaching out? Have they moved on? Were they more valuable than I realized? This shift in thinking is crucial because it forces them to see you differently. And when you were chasing, you were predictable, but now you are an unknown, and people are drawn to what they don't fully understand. The avoidant may not consciously recognize this as desire, but their brain begins working to resolve the uncertainty, and that's where obsession starts. Well, here's the thing. The power of walking away isn't about making them obsess. It's about reclaiming your own value. It's about understanding that you don't have to convince anyone to appreciate you. You don't have to prove your worth by overextending yourself. True power comes from knowing that you deserve mutual effort, not just breadcrumbs of attention when someone feels like giving it. Walking away teaches you to prioritize yourself. It allows you to break free from the emotional roller coaster and find stability within. If the avoidant comes back, it should not be because they fear losing control, but because they are truly willing to change. And if they don't, then you've already won because you chose yourself. The real lesson isn't in making someone chase you. It's in realizing you were never meant to chase in the first place. At the end of the day, understanding why avoidants obsess after you walk away isn't just about them, it's about you. It's about recognizing that you hold the power, that your worth is not determined by how hard you chase or how much effort you put into convincing someone to stay. Avoidants operate in patterns driven by fear, control, and emotional distance. But the moment you step back, everything shifts. They are no longer in control. Their certainty is gone. And their brain begins to assign value to what they once took for granted: your presence, your energy, your attention. But here's what truly matters. You don't need to wait for someone to realize your worth. You don't need to rely on someone else's obsession or regret to validate your importance. The real power is in walking away, not to manipulate, but to free yourself, to let go of cycles that drain you, to stop being someone's afterthought and start being your own priority. So if you've ever found yourself stuck in the push and pull of an avoidant dynamic, remember this. Your value doesn't increase when they finally realize what they lost. Your value was there all along. You just needed to see it for yourself. And when you do, you'll no longer be waiting for an avoidant to chase you. You'll be too busy walking towards something far greater: your own self-worth, your own freedom, and the kind of love that doesn't require you to beg for it. Thank you all for listening, for showing up, and for investing in your own growth. The greatest power you will ever have is knowing your worth and never settling for less. Keep moving forward, keep choosing yourself, and remember, you are not here to chase, you are here to be valued.